Good morning and welcome to the Cloud Design Box podcast. Here with us today, we have Anoo Padte, who's the lead product manager for Reading Coach. Hi, Anoo.
Hi, Darren. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's lovely to have you here today, talking about this exciting app, the standalone Reading Coach app. Now, we know that reading capacity is one of the best early indicators of future success in education and arguably in life because of better earning potential. And we know as well that during the pandemic, reading scores, reading ability dropped back quite a lot, and we need to catch up on that. So what is the Microsoft standalone Reading Coach, and why is it relevant today?
It's such an interesting question. It's also a really interesting time, Darren, isn't it? Because there are multiple dynamics at play here. Like you just said, the pandemic caused a sharp decline in reading fluency, also math and other subjects, and with students who were already struggling and behind. That meant that learning just got more and more inequitable. Now, in the US alone, there was a 30% loss in reading fluency and reading proficiency, but globally, 100 million learners are not proficient in reading. And we know that fluent readers are 4 times more likely to graduate from high school and get better jobs, just like you said. Reading really is that foundation, isn't it, of all learning. And while there have been some strides to close those gaps in reading proficiency, the progress is really slow. So that's one dynamic at play. Now, what we've noticed is that all the research studies that came out of the pandemic, especially between 2021 and 2023, showed that of all the interventions that are shown to be effective in closing this gap, personalized learning, really personalized, engaging learning is shown to have the greatest positive effect in closing the gap. Now, short of every learner ending up with a one-on-one human tutor, which is not tenable, what else can we do? So at Microsoft Education, we've been asking ourselves, can we make reading truly engaging and personalized for learners of all ages? Now, the other dynamic at play is the pandemic resulted in device access for more learners. Like there's close to 190 million, and I think the number keeps climbing, learners globally that have access to a device. But that's also caused this particular generation to struggle with attention and distractibility. So if you're going to produce something, and they're reading 140 characters on average, isn't it? And they're used to, how do we balance this loss in reading fluency with the fact that students do have devices, but in order for them to actually read, it has to be personalized. It has to be engaging to build that competence. But that engagement is also critical for sustaining their attention. Sustaining their attention enough that they might invest in the act of reading and getting lost in it. So the quest that we've been after is, could technology powered by AI, used responsibly, really begin to help close those gaps by making the learning personalized, but almost doing it in a way that's so engaging that the learner gets lost in reading and perhaps even falls in love with it. And before they know it, they've read way more than 140 characters. So I think of it as a problem of many different dynamics, right? It's the reading fluency loss, it's the access to device, it's a generation that's not reading as much, and there's generative AI at play. And could we use it to close this gap? And it's in the quest of that question and that answering that question that we landed on Reading Coach, which is Microsoft's first generative AI tool for learners anywhere. It's available for free for use at school or home. And it really aims to sort of solve for these dynamics that are at play. So that's what that is. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now these challenges that are meeting us, obviously that's hit very hard for those younger students where they are learning to read and that process was interrupted. So clearly everything you've described there about coaching the students, gaining the lost ground, that's it, extremely important to younger students. But is this something that would be appropriate for older students as well? If you were in a school context, elementary school, primary school, as we call them here, high school, or even kind of further education with college level education, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Is this a tool that would be useful for those as well?
Yeah, it's interesting when we were building Reading Coach, when you first birth a new product, you always want to anchor on a demographic because if you try to solve for everybody, you won't solve for anybody. And so while the app looks like it's optimized for, I would say, a 7 to a 13-year-old, in its core content, it is applicable across the ages. And we've seen some really interesting use cases. So we had a hypothesis that it would draw attention from those working with primary and middle school students, but that it should extend and work in its ability to build competence across the ages. So it works really well for obviously the early readers who already know how to decode words. So it doesn't do the decoding, but it works for them. It also, we're seeing use for 11, 12, and 13-year-olds that are in middle school through high school. In the US, 50% of high schoolers are not proficient in reading, which is a really large number. So for older students, here's what the app does. There is a passage library in it that has passages that are complex enough to go right up to the high school level. There's also an ability for students to add their own content. They can add their own content that the teacher gives them, and they can bring that in. Now, the stories themselves, we did a really interesting act. You're playing with generative AI. You don't know what it's going to come back with, and you want to moderate it to make sure that it's interesting but not inappropriate. And so we're looking at the more advanced levels. We spend time thinking about the complexity of the plot versus the complexity of the language. So if you have a high schooler who's struggling with reading, you can't make the language too complex, but you can use slightly richer words. So I might say something like, it was absolutely magnificent versus it was really good. And so I would do that. But the story plot can't be too simple. There has to be a twist and a turn and some tug of the heart and some leaning in that keeps them engaged. So that's how the stories are for the higher levels in the app. So they're appropriate in context and plot line for the older learner. They're longer as well, which allows a more interesting story arc. But the language is more manageable. So that's another thing that we did for them. Now, one interesting thing that's emerged is we're seeing that many of the older learners are either struggling with reading or they're English language learners. So we've seen this in the eastern part of the world, especially. They're using Reading Coach as a English language reading fluency tool. We see this in other parts of the world too, but we've absolutely seen that. We've seen it being used with adults all the way because it's got everything you need for oral reading fluency vetted by research, and it uses that really accessible immersive reader surface. So it works for the older learners. We're seeing a spread of its use.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I mentioned I used to teach English to learners of other languages.
That's so cool.
And it's absolutely right. It actually makes it really authentic because there's nothing worse than looking at an inauthentic text or video or sound clip or whatever that this has clearly been made for the purposes of language learning, and you think, I'm not buying into this. This can just be real stuff. And so these are real stories, but they're not real because actually some of them are crazy. There's an owl that lives in a mountain and stuff. They're not real, but they're realistic. And I see what you're saying. They're engaging because because your reading level might be low, you just happen not to be a great reader. It actually doesn't mean you're an idiot. It doesn't mean you don't have any imagination. It doesn't mean that you don't demand a good story. So I think that balance is great. So with the English as a foreign language, I can completely see that working. What about other languages as well? Is this intended to work if I was for example, I used to be a French teacher. If I wanted students to put their own texts in, for Molière or Les Miserables or something like that, or I was doing German and I wanted to put Steppenwolf in there, Hermann Hesse. Does that work as well in this context?
So it's going to work very soon. It's the number one ask we receive from people is, can this app please work for other languages? So here's what the team is working on, and hopefully it'll come out soon. So one of the first things we're going to do is to make sure we recognize all possible English dialects. So I will tell you, as a person who grew up in India, I have a slightly different accent. Now, I also taught in the United States, so my accent already got adapted because I needed American children to understand me. But still, sometimes I'm like, wait, it didn't quite get me. So the first thing that's going to happen for the app is that non-US, people not in the United States that speak English are more fully understood by the oral reading tech that we have in there. So that's the first thing that's going to happen to reach a broader audience. The other thing that will happen is the entire sort of UI, UX of the app will go into tens of languages like that to cover the globe. So we'll do that. The other thing that like you said, there'll be an ability to paste content in many different languages to be able to read it, because the app is powered at its core reading tech by Immersive Reader, and Immersive Reader is available in 116 different languages. Yeah. So we're going to try to match it as closely as possible. So you could paste your own text, read it in any number of these other languages. And then the final piece, which a lot of people ask for, is will the stories be in other languages too? And yes, many people might be aware of the announcements that just came out from OpenAI with GPT-4o and other LLMs. So we're working on whether we use GPT-4, GPT-4o. We're not clear on what tech we'll use, but we're going to make sure that the stories are also going to be in other languages, including, the Reading Coach allows you to start a story and fork a branch and then continue down the path. And the tech is still getting there where you can ensure consistent translation chapter with chapter. Like if I called something a bucket in the first chapter, but I called it a pail in the next chapter, that would be a problem. And these are live generated stories, so we have to ensure coherence. So we're working on that as well.
It's definitely a bucket, by the way, in case you were wondering.
Hey, I grew up in India, so I grew up with the British English. I adjusted all of my words when I came.
Let me tell you. So I was teaching English. I was teaching English in France, but the textbook was American. I was just like, so kids, this isn't right. This isn't right. I was like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. Turn out page 6. That's just wrong. We're not doing that. So it's really important that the AI understands where you are, where you've come from. It picks up your accent, your dialect, all those things. I did it earlier. I had some fun with this earlier. I put in War of the Worlds, the first part of War of the Worlds, and I did it as Richard Burton because he's just from down the road actually. And I got a good percentage for that. But when I did it as myself, I scored lower. So
there you go.
Need to sound like a famous actor, and then you get better scores.
We announced Reading Coach, and you were there at BET in 2024 January. And I was so nervous that children with British accents were going to walk up to this thing on the booth floor with all this noise behind them, and they would do badly, and they would go, "This app sucks," but it didn't. It was to test it out. I sat down with my niece. She has a thick British accent, even though she's all brown skin and Indian like me, because she's being raised there. And I had her read it like for 2 days. I was like, let's hope. And she just read like she does. And it was doing okay. But I could tell if it really caught her dialect and her pronunciation, it would do way better. So we're working on that.
Yeah. But it's fine because when I did that, there was the odd word that, didn't sound right because I didn't do it as Richard Burton. But it gives you the words, right? It says you did really well, 98%, but there's a couple of words you just didn't say right at all. And it shows you those as well. So that's great. It's great to hear about the languages. I did try that a little bit earlier. I know it actually says at the moment US only, but I did the French and it absolutely worked. It totally worked. I did a book called La Femme qui attendait. Put that in, read it out, and it said my French was perfect. So that must be right.
Wow. All right. I'll let the team know that.
It works. I don't know if they knew. I did the German as well. I did the Welsh. Now, Immersive Reader kicked in for Welsh, and it actually did read out the text to me in Welsh. Really nice. The accent was spot on as well. So Immersive Reader's got it. But it chose not to give me the recording button to let me have a go myself. So obviously Welsh isn't there yet. But French and German, that works.
Oh, amazing.
So,
all right.
Fantastic.
The team's been testing and pushing it as we work on the localization and globalization of the app.
So we'll take it. Should we take a look at the app and see what it does? So I think we've talked around the reasons for it and the strategy for it, but so that folks can have a look at it and see.
Totally. Let's do it. All right. So let's take a look at this. So here's Reading Coach. And guess what? I went to coach.microsoft.com. And when you go there, this is what you see. You see this page that says, start reading. Now you can use Reading Coach either as an individual learner at home. And if you click Start Reading, what it's going to do is it's going to ask you to, if I click it, I've got so many different Microsoft personal accounts, it'll just log me in. So I won't click on it just yet. But it will just ask you for a Microsoft personal account. If you don't have one, it'll create one along the way. Yeah.
Okay. So when you say personal account, so for example, because I'm old, I've got a Hotmail account. So that is a Microsoft personal account, but sort of a Windows Live, that kind of stuff as well.
Exactly. So it could be a live account, it could be an Outlook.com account, it could be an Xbox account, it could be a Hotmail account.
Okay, so you can use your Xbox account. If you're a child and you've got an Xbox, well done.
Yeah.
And you can use that.
Yeah, because when you got that as a child, and if you're under the age of 13, your parent had to consent for you to have that account. So we do have this piece around, there's a human in the loop because this is a generative AI tool at the end of the day. So even though the content is completely moderated and safe, we do have that piece in there. So you could use it with a personal account. And what we mean by Microsoft personal account is you start logging in, you go, I don't even know what that really means. You can put in, it'll ask you, do you want to create one? Because you're like, I don't know if any of this is a Microsoft personal account. You can say create one. And all it does is it asks you for an email address. To be perfectly honest, the email address I use for it is my Gmail address.
Right.
Because my family wanted to use Google Calendars. I have a Gmail address. And I just put that in and that became my Microsoft personal account. So it's just any email address can be associated with the Microsoft personal account. That's all it is. It takes about 5 to 10 seconds to get into the app.
Fantastic.
Go ahead, Darren. You were going to say.
I was going to say. So the reason you do a personal one is maybe you're not in a school. I'm in touch with a lot of homeschoolers that use these technologies and want to. They're really excited about this. Really, really excited because it means even though they're not in a proper school, with a Microsoft 365 tenant and government IDs and all that stuff, they could actually just use this. So if you're a parent with some children and you want them to improve their reading, they can sign on with the personal one. But then over on the school side, obviously people will have Microsoft 365 accounts that they log in with to get into things like Teams and SharePoint and all the rest of it, and email. And you can use those, but something has to happen there, doesn't it? The IT admins have to do some stuff.
Yeah, the IT admins have to join the preview. When they click on join preview, they're just taken to fill out a form. The form basically comes to one of us. And we give them some instructions and information on how to enable it for their Microsoft 365 education tenant. And once it's enabled for everybody in that tenant. And then students and educators can simply, again, click start reading, sign in with their school account and use the app.
Fantastic. Good. And then once you're in, you get to do the good stuff. You get to I guess there's 3 different things, isn't it? By the looks of it, there's create a story, that's AI. Read a passage from the libraries, that's pre-made, and add a passage, which is take War of the Worlds and stick it in, read it yourself. Stick
it in here, and you can read it yourself. Yeah, exactly. And the passage library, it goes through levels 1 through 8. And it has Excel levels passages in there. So if I went here, and you'll see this nonfiction passages and there's fiction passages. So Crisscross of the Street is a fiction passage and it'll pull it up in Immersive Reader and you could read it. You could do that. Or you could pick up let's look at this one. Enrico discovers a globe is fiction as well. How plastic is recycled? Interesting. So you might find a teacher in a science classroom say, hey, let's read this as part of your science class. So you could end up doing that as well. So you could pick from the level library. And now it thinks I'm going to be reading that. So it's recorded the fact that I'm in the middle of reading how plastic is recycled. Or we could create a story. And it's interesting. You notice this. There's a reward. This is a new feature we just announced. There's 20 minutes to go before I unwrap something new. Shall we go find out what it is?
Yeah.
Let's
so it's 20 minutes of reading. You can't just sit and have a cup of tea or an orangeade. You have to read for 20 minutes.
Exactly.
As the gamers say, you've got to grind. You've got to do the grinding.
Exactly. But I'm not going to read with you for 20 minutes. I have a demo account. But 20 minutes, that's often we hear from teachers. That's what they ask students how long they ask students to read every day when they're working on their reading proficiency. That's how that was picked. And so and you could do 20 minutes of reading with a story, a passage that from the library or add your own content. It doesn't matter how you spend your 20 minutes reading, but how about we do a story for the purposes of this conversation? Now,
Yeah.
I'm in a demo account, so it's going to give me a gift in less than 20 minutes because you probably don't want to sit here listening to me read for 20 minutes. But in reality, it happens 3 minutes. All right. So Darren, here we are.
Look at those.
I need to choose a character for the story. Darren, who's going to be in our character? Who's going to be the character?
Can we do? There's a lot of talk about bears at the moment. Should we do a bear?
All right, we could do bear. Before we get to that, what I really want is a giraffe, and I don't know if I'll get it, but I can click on it. It says
I see. That's grayed out.
Yeah, it's grayed out. I can't get the giraffe just yet. I have to work to get the giraffe, and the giraffe could be part of my next story, which is kind of cool. All right, well, you said bear. Let's pick a bear. And where's the bear going to be?
I can't say in the woods, but an island. That's quite close.
There you go.
There might be a little forest in the middle. Islands often have a little forest in the middle of them, don't they?
Exactly.
So let's
It's funny you said forest, because when we were debating this feature, I kept saying to the team, an enchanted forest. And they said, Anoo, sometimes enchanted forests produce very scary stories. We don't want 6 and 7. I'm like, you're right. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into even placing these, because you could end up with a really scary story for a 7-year-old who'll get turned off and they'll never read again. So there's a lot of content moderation and consideration that goes into age appropriateness and what does engagement really look like? What makes something interesting and engaging? So I kept saying to the team, an enchanted forest would be great. And they're like, Anoo, here are all the stories that emerge when you say that. We can't do that. I'm like, all right.
It is fundamentally a dark place, a forest, isn't it? And there are elves and other things, fairy folk.
Exactly. And then when we had put circus, because I was like, okay, team, we got to do circus. And they were like, Anoo, no clowns then. No clowns. I'm like, you're right. No clowns, but circuses, please. And so they did put other characters that could belong in a circus, or it could be fantastical. Every story here is fictional. So we don't worry about hallucination in reading coach. We don't have to. Though we do absolutely moderate it for not producing stories that are so out there that they're scary and get so whimsical that they could be disturbing. So we absolutely moderate for that. So let's do
it is still on rails. It's AI, it's creative.
Yes.
You never quite know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Except what you get will be on rails and it will be sensible and appropriate.
Exactly. It's fully safeguarded and it has to meet Microsoft's responsible AI standards, which I will tell you, trying to release the first generative AI tool for learners, you got through a lot of responsible AI work before you can release this. A lot of checks and balances in place. Should we choose it at level 3, which is roughly, I say, it's like 3rd, 4th grade, so 8, 9-year-old. Okay, great. So, and there's an example passage here, so you could see, a child is after all reading this. There's no teacher in the loop here watching them, so that they're reading on their own. They can look at this and go, does that look like something I could read? So that's why there's an example passage to help them sort of decide.
And this is where the personalized learning and the independence comes in, doesn't it? Because you might say to students, do you know what? You've been reading level 2. You've been reading at level 2 for quite a while now. Why don't you try a 3? Give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? So you're encouraging your students to progress at an appropriate time as well.
Exactly. So let's choose that. And I've never seen this story, Darren. I don't know what's coming back, but here it is.
It's new every time.
It's new every time. And so I'm going to start reading this story and let's see what happens. And this is immersive reader that I'm reading in. Brownie the bear lived in a cozy cave. He found a map that led to an island and rowed his boat there. The island was different. The air smelled of salt, the trees were new, and the sand sparkled. Brownie lost the map. What should he do? And as I finished reading that, here's what happened. I finished the first chapter, and now I have a choice. I get to pick my own path through the story. Should we go exploring the island or find the way back up? All right, let's do one more. And here we go. So we'll do this, and it's generating the next chapter for the story. Again, one that we don't know what's going to come back. But before I show this one, I want to show you a couple of other things. So this is Immersive Reader. It's a fully accessible digital learning surface. And, I can do all kinds of modifications to make this a comfortable reading surface. So if I was a learner who was struggling with reading and I needed a larger font size, or I needed to change my font type, I could do that. I could also turn on nouns. If you want language understanding to emerge and parts of speech understanding to emerge, you could do that by turning it on. I could put syllabification on those. And it's been shown, Immersive Reader is an award-winning product. It's been shown to actually really, really help with dyslexic learners and also learners who have poor attention or struggle with attention. I shouldn't say poor, but struggle with attention.
We're big fans of Immersive Reader. We cover that in our own training because it's so important. And the other thing is about Immersive Reader is, I know we're talking about Reading Coach, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in Teams, it's in SharePoint, it's in Word, it's absolutely in PowerPoint, it's everywhere. Just if ever you struggle. And I also like the widgets, the little symbols that come up.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen some lovely examples.
So if I do this, if I click on map, it should give me a picture of a map because I may not be able to read the word map, but now I know what it is. So it tells me it's a map.
There we are.
So, all right, let's read this next chapter, see what happens in our story. Okay, we'll start reading. Brownie felt lost on the island without his map. He saw a sparkly seashell and picked it up. Admiring its beauty, Brownie decided to climb a tree to explore the island. He saw monkeys and colorful birds in the air. Brownie knew to be careful and stay safe. What other adventures would Brownie face on the mysterious island? Now, we finished 2 chapters, and let's pretend I'm 7 and I'm kind of tired. I could go on to the next chapter. There's 3 chapters up to level 3, and then they get to 5-chapter stories. I could see how I'm doing. And look, I unlocked the giraffe. I got the giraffe. Now I can keep the giraffe if I want to. And it says, your effort paid off. Now you can create stories with giraffe as the main character. Or I could swap it because you know what? I like the giraffe, but I like the tiger even better. So I could keep the tiger and it will become part of my collection of characters I can use to read with Reading Coach and create stories with.
So it's really gamified, isn't it? It's that kind of rewards-based stuff that you can, you work your way through it, you do a bit of reading, you achieve that outcome, and you unlock an animal or you unlock a place, and those things that were grayed become ungrayed.
Yeah. Exactly. Now the thing I have to say is, gamification comes in many forms, and so the team sweated a lot on what the engagement principles would be for Reading Coach. And as a former teacher, my behest was that we really look at intrinsic motivation. If you're really going to get a generation of kids beginning to read more, well, is there a chance that they might actually like it and maybe even love it one day? And so we have something like unlocking characters. So you'll notice the app doesn't have coins or points. I'm not dinging any of those, but I'm just saying we really think about the intrinsic motivation. So now what you unlock keeps you in the flow of reading. It's ideal reading.
You're inside the act of reading. You're not saying, I remember, right, years ago, and I'm very, very old, but I remember being a child and having a BBC microcomputer playing a game, and it was a maths thing, right? And you had to get the maths question right. And if you got 3 maths questions right, then that would all disappear and a game of Space Invaders would come up and you got to play Space Invaders for a bit, which sounds cool and we did love it. But it's almost saying like, maths is rubbish, isn't it? But if you do a bit of maths, then you get to play Space Invaders.
Exactly.
And I think it's the same with the coins and, all these other, whereas this keeps the reward in the context of reading. Reading, as I keep saying this to my son, learning is its own reward. And it completely is.
Yeah, it is. But it's hard to sort of say it, and then it's a different thing to live it. So our research team thinks a lot about this, and they work with experts, and we weigh in and we think about like how do we keep them in that flow and actually situate that intrinsic motivation as part of learning. We also work with a number of gaming experts. We're lucky we're at Microsoft, so we can work with people who worked on Minecraft or worked on other gaming products to help us think through the types of the variety of gamification you can do and then apply that to the learning pedagogical context that is true and right for reading. So that's where that gamification comes from.
I love working in a cross-curricular way. I've always tried to do that. And, when you look at those other things, so for example, you look at Minecraft for education, which is a fantastic thing in its own right. You get to go in because you're in sort of a creative mode. You can create things, you can build towers, you can build houses. If you're into redstone, you can build little electrical circuits. And I can imagine, and you can do code, you can do programming kind of stuff with Make Code, and you can actually, all right, make a big tower of dynamite and then set it off, and you do stuff like that. And what you can do as well is you can tell stories. you can build spaces, for example, in Minecraft, and working with other characters, and then you can come back into this and you could write a story, get some help. You might use some generative AI to tidy it up, and then you can bring it in and you can make that the passage that you read. And then you're bringing all those skills together. You're being creative, you're making things, and the whole thing comes back into this, and you practice reading it out loud as well. Because I think this is the reading coach. This is a standalone reading coach. But you know, I would almost call it the reading aloud coach, because that's actually the important
That's
bit.
exactly.
It'd be weird to say that, but
it totally is, because there's a lot of research that shows that oral reading fluency has a huge impact on reading proficiency all up. So there's an agreement that first, that fluency in reading and proficiency emerges from practice. The volume of reading actually matters, but you got to make it really engaging for students to put in time in this, even 20 minutes a day. Also, it's been shown that oral reading fluency correlates with reading comprehension. And it helps the instruction around oral reading fluency. And I'll show you a feature that does that, helps struggling readers. So getting targeted practice when you can't read fluently orally, and the correction of that has effect on your overall reading as well. And, you know, the correlation with comprehension, it goes all the way to high school. So oral reading fluency as a basis for reading proficiency, there's tremendous research that shows that it's highly effective.
Yeah. And I don't know how you read in your head, but when I read in my head, I read aloud quietly, if that makes sense. I try and put an energy and a sound behind the words, and I think it's important because that difference between, you know, well, here I am, I'm reading, it's kind of a monotone, and hey, here I am, I'm reading, but I'm making it sound really. If you do that in your head, I always think that kind of burns those thoughts, burns those words into your brain. This is not science, but that's what it feels like to me, that experience of reading. And I know that when I really engage with a piece of reading that I'm doing, rather than just, oh, it's some email I don't really care about, but if I'm really engaging in something, I hear the words in my head. And the more you practice reading out loud, the more you develop those pathways in your brain to help you do that at all times.
So we talked about that targeted practice being an important piece of why oral reading fluency works. So let's take a look at these words. These are some of the words that I didn't pronounce fully or were not my best reading. So I can practice these words. Let's click on practice words. And here we are in the word practice.
These words were the most challenging for you. Select any word to temple them again.
All right, let's practice with that.
When you're ready, press the microphone and read the word out loud.
And what I can do is I can stretch the word to know where to emphasize, how to emphasize the syllables. I can hear
it out.
And now I can read it, and I'll get feedback on how I do. Without.
You're making your brain stronger. Nice work.
Yeah.
So now, this feature, this word practice feature, it really gives you that targeted reading practice as part of your oral fluency work. And we could go back from that. And I got without, and I could continue doing that. Now, what is also interesting is these words will automatically be included in the next chapter without me even realizing it. So if
that's the AI. It's grounded on you, isn't it? That's amazing.
It's personalized to you. Exactly. Now, let's go back to the homepage. So we looked at a few different things. We looked at each of the modes and immersive reader and also the practice words. So there's personalization happening at multiple levels here. There's the story being generated you had a say in, and now you can even unlock characters and create new stories. There's the AI and generative AI being used for the stories. There's also this piece around the speech to text. When immersive reader was listening, it was doing speech to text. AI was being used to assess the reading fluency, detect the words that the learner finds challenging, and it does that. And then you saw the fork in the story. That's another piece of generative AI. That's personalization as well with AI, because there's a path and you get to choose. And then we also take the words and we embed them, which is another sort of piece of generative AI in there. So there's multiple layers of using generative AI, or what I call old school AI, or actually one of my colleagues calls old school AI, as a way to Bring personalization for you.
I love the idea of old school AI because it's not new. It's got a lot better, but it's not new. And we've been doing sort of machine learning and expert systems for a long time, and various heuristics to try and understand language. I did a lot of computer aided language learning back in the day, and it's interesting how it's developed. So with the adding the passages, you could literally put anything you want in there. You could. I tell you what I did earlier. I went to do you know Project Gutenberg?
No, I don't know about
It's a wonderful. It's been around since before the web. I used because I'm that old. We used to go on the internet and connect to this project, and we'd have to download an index file. Anyway, it's on the web now. It's all fine. It's Project Gutenberg, but it's free books, and there are classics in there. Classics, American classics, English classics. All the old ones are in there, and you can download the text files, what they call UTF.
Oh, really?
Text files.
Amazing.
It's all in there.
Wow.
So you can find them.
I could find any of these. So if I went here and I just took a piece of text from this.
Yep. So that's the PDF one. You could do that, but that's too much. That's too hard because you've got to select. If you go back a bit to the other and go down to plain text UTF-8.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh,
and
here it is.
And it's the text, and obviously you scroll down to get to the good bit.
Okay. Oh,
grab it.
Okay.
Paste it in. They're all the classics are in there. So I got all the words out
Oh
there
my
earlier,
goodness.
and
That's
all
amazing.
that stuff.
I didn't realize these were all just free sitting there. It might be something for us to talk about in our PD course, which I want to tell you about. So let's go back to Reading Coach.
Cool. I think
And
basically if the author's dead, you're probably okay, because it becomes free.
And this one is called The Coming of Betsy. So we'll give it a title. So you can imagine a teacher saying to students, please read The Coming of Betsy chapter from this book. And you can copy paste it, or here it is in an assignment I'm giving you or whatever. And they would bring it into Reading Coach next. And we have teachers do this all the time. And, I can go back and make my adjustments in Immersive Reader because sometimes I don't like the syllabification. So I can make that adjustment. I can say, all right, here I go. I'm going to read this one out loud. And you would just read it. That's all it is. Betsy sat staring through the window of the first house she had ever been in. Oh my goodness. This is fascinating. You can put any text you want. Oh, and this is a demo account. So if I read for 5 seconds, it's going to give me a new character.
That's very generous.
For the demo, it is.
That's brilliant. So imagine that, literally anything. If you're reading something in school, because there's different kinds of reading, one of the things I really don't like to hear or to see very much is if you've got a whole class of kids, they've all got the same book in front of them, and the teacher picks and chooses which one reads out aloud, or sometimes the kids volunteer, which is fine. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of kind of discomfort there. Yeah. And what this coaching allows is actually that whole process to become individual, and the students can do the same thing. They can practice reading aloud. They can be assessed at it, kind of,
exactly.
in a formative way. But they don't have that embarrassment of reading in front of the whole class.
No. Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And, it also allows them to pace themselves. So like if I ever wanted to go back to Brownie Explorers, a New Island, I can go back into the app and I can keep reading that one. Or I can go back to How Plastic is Recycled and so on. I can also read something again. And look, The Coming of Betsy has been saved for me. And I can come back and read that one. So it's anything you pasted, any story you started, anything from the passage library is saved for you. And I can also go see how I'm doing, which is motivating for learners. So, hey, I have a first timer badge and I got 100% accuracy, but 63% the last time I was here, and I got some characters, so I can see that. And some kids really, we've had mixed reactions. Some kids love seeing the accuracy and beating their scores, and they even compete, and others are like, I don't care about that. I'm just lost in the story and I'm reading. Yeah.
Nice. And we need both those kinds of people in the world. So that's fantastic. So we're not far from the summer holidays now. And we know that literacy slips backwards during the summer holidays because you're not reading all the time in school. And, there's actually really good stuff on TV now and all these streaming services. So Is that something that Reading Coach can help with, that stop you falling back into that gap over the holidays?
Absolutely. We were noticing that as summer came closer, this would be Reading Coaches. I like to say this is Reading Coaches for summer as well. It's not had a summer yet before, but summer is a really interesting time from a reading perspective. Of all the things that we do in school, reading is one of those things that universally people hope, educators really hope students will continue to engage in. And that loss over a 6, 10, 12-week period is real. It's called the summer slide often. It's pretty real. So there's several things that can keep learners engaged through the summer. So just in time for summer, we released that unlock feature. And one of the reasons we did it was really so that students feel engaged. And already, the feature was released only like 2 weeks ago. We've had reporting anecdotes coming from social media telling us that there are learners who are like rushing home after school's done to keep reading because they can't wait to get their next character. Now that is what we were hoping for. Now we're hoping that will keep them engaged, a feature that'll keep them engaged. And we're thinking of other ways as well that'll keep them coming back and falling in love with reading. But there's also a few specials that we're doing aside from that feature that we just released. So first and foremost, you can, like we said at the beginning, like you can use the app at home or school. So if schools are going to give students devices to take home, or if the school account is something the student knows about, like they know their email address for school and their password, they can just go to coach.microsoft.com, log in on any device with their school account, and they should be able to use it. So that's all it is. It does not need to be exactly on the school device. It could be just with their school account at coach.microsoft.com. It'll work. So they can do that. They can also do it with a home because, they may not remember their email address and password. So teachers can tell parents, hey, encourage your child to read at home. Here's the school account information, or just, go in with the Microsoft personal account and use it. Now, teachers don't need more work before they get out for summer. So we produce some materials for them, and I'm going to quickly show them to you. So one thing that we produce for them is an easy to use PDF. It's a PowerPoint, actually. They can download it. They can completely edit it, other than the Microsoft branding pieces. And they can put their own instructions, and they can tell parents easily about Reading Coach and its use over the summer. And I'll tell you in a moment how to get that. The other thing that we notice is it's going to be, summer also means professional development for teachers. So we've produced a few materials for them. One is there's a video at aka.ms/readingcoach-tutorial. And I'll give these URLs to you. Again, it's aka.ms/readingcoach-tutorial. That's a beautiful video produced by Mike Tolson, who many people know. That gives you a walkthrough of it. So teachers who are going, wait, before I tell parents about it, I'll play with the app, but I want to understand the feature set end to end and get familiar with it myself. They can do that. And then there is a course we produced. And this course comes with some credits. And teachers can get certification and certificates for it. So there's a Building Reading Fluency with Reading Coach course that is at aka.ms/readingcoach course. So that's for teachers themselves and for them to tell parents. We also have, other materials, like there's a whole deck that walks them through what Reading Coach is, all its features, all kinds of stuff. So they can get familiar with it. Administrators can tell parents can tell educators can tell parents. And then we have a special thing going on this summer. Any school or district that has 25 educators can request an exclusive professional development session with the Microsoft Education product management team. And me and a few others will roll up our sleeves, and we will do 1-hour webinars with a group of 25 educators or more. That's all it is. Best way to find out about this is by going to aka.ms/readingcoach-educator-community. If you go there, that's our educator community. That's where we go with really, really wet paint early ideas to get feedback. It's also where we make announcements. It's also where we stay connected and so on. And so educators can request PD from us. But now imagine that educators told students, hey, practice with Reading Coach through the summer. At the end of the summer, we will have a way for them to tell us how their students did. Did Reading Coach actually help them stay engaged? Did it help them slow down or prevent the summer slide? And we would love to celebrate these learners. So we want to produce we'll produce a special sticker pack of Reading Coach characters and send it over to classrooms that use Reading Coach and saw either a slowdown or a prevention of the summer slide. Because at the end of the day, we produce Reading Coach for a whole generation of kids to learn to read and fall in love with it. So sticker pack for the classroom. And also we want to highlight and celebrate their story. What worked? What didn't?
Fantastic. Yeah.
So
and for partners as well, Anoo. Yeah, they get the stickers as well. Great. So I did the learning this morning, so I deserve a sticker for that.
There you go. Yeah, we'll put out a special edition blog at the end of the summer, celebrating the educators and their classrooms.
Fantastic.
Because we know that that's motivating. We want to celebrate them. We want other people to be inspired by what they've done. And so we want to celebrate the community. So that's the summer stuff that we're doing right now.
Right. So lots of help, lots of videos, and all these links. We'll take these links. We'll put those into the blog that comes with this post totally. As well. Yeah. So help for teachers out there. Mike Folsom stuff. Fantastic. Cloud Design Box. Actually, we've made some videos about this as well, so they'll be on our YouTube, our website.
Thank you.
So they're really good. It's great to hear about that community as well, because one thing I would say is Microsoft is very, very, very keen to listen, especially these learning accelerators, like the search coach and the reading coach and the math coach. Lots and lots of feedback is being used to make those better, and I'm seeing some very, very fast iterations on improvements. So it's worth getting involved in that for two reasons. Well, mainly the stickers, but also your kids might learn to read better over the summer, which is a good thing. And your feedback definitely will be taken on board. I'm sure of that, because I've seen the route that things come back to, and it's you. It's not some faceless kind of box in Microsoft. It's you and your friends.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you've had first-hand experience with it. Heidi Kim was an amazing product manager on the Reading Coach team. She runs our community. She stays closely connected with the teachers for Reading Coach, and Emma Gray runs the Math Coach community, and they're really we'll have really wet paint ideas, and we'll go, well, let's go ask the teachers, do they think that this would make any sense? And sometimes I'll show up and I'll hand wave it, and I'm like, so imagine this, and they're like, I knew there are no pictures, it's just words coming from your mouth. I'm like, but let's go on a little journey and imagine that we could do this. And they'll say, well, this part of the imagination doesn't quite work, and here's what works. And we go, great, we have a starting point. So before we even spend cycles crafting all kinds of things and then discovering that even a prototype doesn't work, we just want to lean and build with our community. We really want them to be a part of building the product.
Yeah, there's some great pedagogy behind all these learning accelerators, and it's talking to teachers, super important. I know there's lots of discussions with really, really clever people at universities as well. They're all feeding into this stuff. It's an incredible product, an incredible program.
Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, thanks for coming in and showing us the reading, the standalone reading coach, and more importantly, talking about some of the pedagogy of it and the reasons why, it's something, it's a valuable thing to use your time and the time of your pupils and your students on, because it's so important, this reading, and it's going to make a massive difference actually to the rest of their lives. Those younger students, if they go into the next year and the year after that with a better reading skill, everything they learn is going to be more learned. Going to learn it better. And the same in the senior school as well. If you're doing this, it's not just an English thing. This is going to help you in history, in geography, in science, because it is the biggest predictor of future success. Is that you're reading at different ages. It's so important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. There's loads of other great things coming on. So will you come back and show us some more cool things another time?
I totally will. The team is working relentlessly on a number of different things for Reading Coach and even other products. So we'll be happy to be back.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anoo.
Thank you so much.